We're here at the heart of the Edinburgh Festival in Dynamic Earth, and it is my absolute delight to welcome on stage the legendary musician, broadcaster and activist Tom Robinson. We're here to talk to you about some of the tracks that have influenced, inspired and shaped your life. The first track we're going to hear, and we'll talk about it afterwards, is The Beatles and Twist and Shout. Well, shake it up, baby, now. Shake it up. The Beatles, of course, Twist and Shout, and for anyone who can't see us right now, some terrible dancing going on the stage. Tom, why that?
I can't believe it's 60 years since that came out. And even now, 6 decades later, it still sounds so fresh and energetic and vital, and like they felt they had to make that music or they would burst. Up to then, we'd had kind of insipid showbiz pop stars. The aspiration of rock and roll stars like Tommy Steele had been to be turned into family entertainers. But the Beatles came along. They didn't want to be family entertainers. They just wanted to rock out. And I bought that first record I ever bought, 7 and 6pence of my pocket money saved up. And you got 4 songs on the EP, and every one of them was a winner. And it was sheer magic to hear that coming out of the family record player. My dad didn't think so, but my God, what a shot in the arm that was.
And was that the sort of life-changing moment then, hearing that and going, I need to do this?
Well, my older brother had come back with Bill Haley records 10 years earlier and blown the family gramophone apart. They had a wind-up gramophone with a horn back then. And Bill Haley and Elvis Presley had driven my dad to distraction. So this was the first music that was mine, you know, and it felt like it was my generation, and it was something that was fresh and modern and happening. So, you know, a good inspiration to turn you into a music fan to hear that stuff coming out. And the 60s was an extraordinary decade for fresh minted music being invented.
And what about first bands, school bands, you know, getting onto a stage for the first time?
I think the real moment for me was seeing Alexis Korner, because I was a problem child in my teens. I got sent away from my boarding school and ended up at a therapeutic community for disturbed adolescents in Kent. And one of the old boys from there happened to be the father of the British blues, Alexis Korner. He came down for a visit one day and played a concert with an acoustic guitar in the principal's study. 40 of us crammed in there to watch him. And to see this swarthy, grizzled, 45-year-old man pick up a guitar, open his mouth and sing the blues about racism, police brutality, injustice, bad-hearted women. I mean, the whole blues gamut. To see the real thing in front of you, I thought, whatever that is, I want to be one of those.
Yeah, that lit the touch paper then. A combination of hearing the Beatles and seeing Alexis Korner.
Absolutely, and Alexis introduced me to the next record that we are going to hear, because the incomparable Nina Simone.
So did he actually introduce you? He played it to you guys?
He told me about it and I researched it. So,
okay.
But Nina Simone, an artist without compare.
Well, you can tell that you're a seasoned and professional broadcaster, because you've moved us on nicely to the next record, which is Nina Simone and Mississippi Goddamn.
Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me. That's it!
Nina Simone here on BBC Radio Scotland and BBC Sounds. Mississippi Goddamn, recorded in 1964, the same year as Twist and Shout came out at the Carnegie Hall, chosen by my guest Tom Robinson. Tom, what about hearing it for the first time?
The sheer incendiary, righteous anger of the civil rights movement is blazing in every note that she sings. There's a line towards the end where she goes, "You don't have to live next to me, just give me my equality." Everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn. You know she's not fooling around. I mean, it was a brilliant anthem, and it fires you up, even though it was somebody else's struggle. Mm-hmm. You can totally understand people marching for their rights, demanding that equality. It was inspiring.
And was that a sort of moment when you realised that pop music, whatever, but music in general could be a force for change rather than just for dancing and having a good time?
Well, you don't know whether pop music really is a force for change, to be honest. I mean, you could argue that although we took part in Rock Against Racism with The Clash, and we managed to get black bands and white bands together in the late 70s to counter the National Front and have big rallies, I don't honestly know if any National Front skinheads turned up at any of those shows and went, oh God, I've been so stupid. I don't think it changes minds, but I think it acts as a fantastic tonic for the troops. So if you already believe what the person on the stage is singing, and you see yourself with another few thousand other people who think the same thing, you go out of there energized. You go, I'm not alone. This is a fight worth fighting. And so I think it's good.
Going back to your own music, and we'll come to more of the sort of activist role that you played in the 70s, but tell us about your first few bands that you had that actually took it on stage and wrote your own material and so on.
Well, we've got to go through David Bowie to get there. In the 60s, I had found myself attracted to other boys at school. Didn't know what that was all about. I didn't understand the emotions I felt. And it was only when other kids started talking about homos this, homos that I suddenly had a name for what I felt my feelings were. And I suddenly realized that I was the thing my parents had warned me against, you know. And that's a terrible feeling, you know, because especially in those days when there were no queer role models for kids who were kind of LGBTQ+, because it was against the law. You went to prison if you were gay. So nobody could live openly and say, hey, you can have a happy life like me. So we had no role models. And so I grew up hating myself all through that. And there was never any music. As a music fan, somebody who loved music so passionately, all the songs were about boy meets girl. They were never about girl meets girl or boy is girl, you know. And David Bowie changed all that. In the early 70s, he came along with that whole thing with the Hunky Dory album, the Ziggy Stardust album, and he suddenly made it cool to be queer.
Yeah, and that was a huge impact on you. Did you suddenly feel like you found your tribe?
Oh, my goodness. In the early 70s, God, when you get to a certain age, you mix your decades up. It was still the early 70s when I left the therapeutic community and moved to London and didn't know anybody, so I thought, I'm going to live openly. I'm going to be who I'm going to be. So I discovered this thing called gay bars in the back of Time Out magazine and suddenly found my tribe there. But then a guy picked me up, took me home. He was a British Rail Guard living near King's Cross, and woke up in his bed. He was downstairs cooking breakfast. I went downstairs and there was a log fire blazing and there was coffee on the table and he'd put on a new album. And he went, wake up, you sleepy head. Yeah, put on your clothes, shake off your bed. Put another log on the fire for me. I've made some breakfast and coffee. And it was David Bowie with Oh You Pretty Things from the Hunky Dory album. I went, oh my God, this is music about us. Not almost about us, but about our actual lives for the first time ever. And on that album that he put on there, the closing track, the Bewley Brothers, just was so dark and mysterious, you could imagine your own storyline to it. And it was transformative to me.
And so the story goes, they wore the clothes, they said the things to make it seem.
David Bowie and the Bewley Brothers here on BBC Radio Scotland and BBC Sounds. Tom, I can hear that, you know, almost the way the lyrics flow as being a huge influence on some of your songwriting. What kind of impact did Bowie have?
We were so turned on by your lack of conclusions. That amazing line there. He was eclectic. He kind of took his music from all over the place. And it was so transformative for me personally to have some music that soundtracked my life.
How did you find music and sort of start playing in bands?
I teamed up with two friends of mine who were better singers than me and better songwriters than me, because I, at that time, had yet to learn the art of singing in tune. And I was very good at organising, so I was good at getting gigs and getting people to turn up to rehearsals and working out a good set list and stuff. But I was better as somebody who was like a background presence and using the other guy's talent as the kind of front for the band. And the band was called Cafe Society. We were an acoustic harmony trio. We had no money, we had no instruments. So the only thing we could do was play in the folk clubs.
Oh, wow. So, and was there an ethos for the Tom Robinson Band straight away? Did you feel, right, I need to do something completely different from Cafe Society?
The main thing that caused me to form the Tom Robinson Band, the single biggest thing, was seeing the Sex Pistols at the 100 Club in London. Because although I hated it, I did realise whatever the next big thing was, it was not a vocal harmony trio.
So you were very honest in saying you hated the Sex Pistols, because everyone goes, oh yeah, it was life-changing, I loved every second of it. Well, I mean, realistically, there aren't that many people that saw the original Sex Pistols up close and personal in the 100 Club or one of those small venues. What was the experience like then?
Well, get this. It was very early days. They hadn't written most of the really great songs that they had. They're still learning to play the instruments, but they already had the attitude. Instead of placating the audience, saying, please love us, which is what we've been taught to do, they were going, don't love us. So they were doing cover versions of easy-to-learn songs like Small Faces, What You Gonna Do About It? School bands covering it would go, I want you to know that I love you, baby. Want you to know that I care. And Rotten was going, I want you to know that I hate you, baby. Want you to know I don't care. It was completely shocking to see somebody really shoving it in the audience's faces. They didn't bother to tune up. They turned up half an hour late. First thing Rotten said when he got on the stage was, who's going to buy me a drink? And I did get that it didn't matter if you could sing in tune or not. Suddenly I thought, I can form a band of my own.
So the Tom Robinson Band was formed and definitely had a punk aesthetic up to a point. In many ways, far more musical and you know, developed than a lot of the punk bands. And you embraced all sorts of different genres as well.
Yeah, the thing was I was too old to be a punk. I was already 26 at the time I saw the Sex Pistols. So I couldn't have got away with putting on leather and bondage strides and pretending to be a punk. I only knew how to play rock music, but I did know that whatever you did, it had to be very, very real and totally honest. And at that time, I'd been involved in campaigning for lesbian and gay rights. And at that time, Eric Clapton made a famous public pronouncement in favour of Enoch Powell on stage in Birmingham. And so many music fans, people who love the blues, people who love reggae, and people who had loved Eric Clapton were appalled. We just went, what is he dreaming of? He's made his fortune playing black music and is now saying we don't want black people in this country. And so a letter was written to the NME saying, who shot the sheriff, Eric? It sure as hell wasn't you. Rock against racism. And loads of people wrote to them and said, what is this Rock Against Racism? Where can we join it? And I was one of the first in the queue. I thought that just sounds like something we can really get behind.
And this kind of, I suppose, this righteous anger that you'd probably inherited or at least been turned on to by Nina Simone, suddenly it becomes part of your life, part of your raison d'etre, and part of the band's life as well. This is infused in the songwriting as well. Was that a sort of conscious effort on your part?
Well, the other thing that had been going on all the while I've been playing in Cafe Society, in my spare time, I'd been an activist, so I'd been a volunteer at Gay Switchboard, and I'd been taking my acoustic guitar along and singing at rallies and stuff. And at the same time that the sus laws, which were heavy-handed police laws where they could arrest black people on site on suspicion of anything, started to be applied to gay people in Earl's Court in London. And so I started seeing friends of mine being beaten up and thrown in the back of police vans. And you suddenly realise it's all the same struggle. You either live in a free and a fair society or you don't. So you can't have one without the other. You stand up against racism, you stand up for LGBT rights, you stand up for feminism, You stand up for Me Too. I mean, it's all got to come together as part of a package. You can't separate off and just fight for one person's rights on their own. So that was the idea behind TRB.
And then you started to have some success. I mean, hit singles, bona fide, genuine hit singles. I mean, how did that feel, as you say, sort of into the second half of your 20s onwards?
Well, the thing is, however much you say to yourself in advance, I'm not going to let success go to my head, it always does. And suddenly, overnight, the other members of the Tom Robinson Band and I all became monsters overnight. We just all became experts. I started telling the drummer how to play the drums. He started telling me how to write songs. You know, we fell apart, squabbling like cats in a sack. Within a year and a half, the band was over.
I know it had such a short lifespan. It seems mad. I mean, Power in the Darkness is such a classic album.
I met the guitar player who was the really key partner of the Tom Robinson Band, Danny Custo. Wonderful guitar player, all those old TRB records, 2468 Motorway, Power in the Darkness, Up Against the Wall, those are all fueled by his guitar playing. So I owe him a huge debt of gratitude.
Drop my truck midway to the motorway station. What line? Motorway sun coming up with the morning light.
Without his guitar playing, we wouldn't have had a successful band. And I had met him at Finchton Manor, which was the therapeutic home for disturbed adolescents. So we had the seeds of our own destruction built into the band from day one. And we could never, whatever we'd done, with the best will in the world, he and I couldn't have stuck together longer than we did.
Well, probably your most prominent protest song, Glad to Be Gay, was famously banned by the BBC. How ironic, Tom.
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. But the person at Radio 1 who was responsible for banning records was very canny. She was called Doreen Davis. She was the assistant to the controller of Radio 1. She ran the controller's office with an iron rod. And she never banned anything. She just said, this isn't suitable for airplay. She had a sticker put on it in the gramophone library saying not to be played without reference to the controller's office. But it's not banned, just isn't suitable for airplay.
Sing if you're glad to be gay. Glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way.
And so we couldn't go and say it's banned and get lots of publicity because we've been banned by Radio 1. She said, no, it hasn't been banned. So they didn't put me on the daytime playlist for another 6 years.
Let's move on to your next choice, which is a band who are also at the forefront of rock against racism, The Clash, and the track that you've chosen from 1982 in combat rock, Straight to Hell.
Water froze. Go straight to hell, boy.
The Clash, and just a snippet of Straight to Hell. Why that particular Clash song? Because they've got so many amazing tracks.
The thing is, the Clash were pioneers of punk in 77. The single White Riot was unlike anything that we'd heard up to that point. It was less than 2 minutes long, like all the great singles, and just was a complete manifesto. I want a riot of my own. But Joe Strummer was so much more than just a manifesto shouting, hard-rocking punk. As we saw, come 1982, by the time that album Combat Rock came around, he felt he'd proved his point, and he could play a song that was mid-tempo, like that one, and stretched out over 5 or 6 minutes, and tell this elaborate tale about kind of GI children left in Vietnam. Really emotional, reaching so much greater emotional depths than anything punk rock had managed to achieve in the course of its time. It was when we saw Joe Strummer for the really top, amazing songwriter that he was, and a truly rounded human being.
I mean, more of a contemporary of yours than a hero. Did you get to hang out with Joe at all?
He hated me.
Oh, no.
Why? I think, I have a theory, I don't know. Joe is long gone and much missed. Mick Jones, top of Hedon, perfectly friendly. We rubbed shoulders, hung out together. Joe was always quite rude and standoffish. And I think, my theory is that he was the son of a diplomat. He was Joseph Mellors, and he'd become Joe Strummer, and he'd become an authentic punk. He'd successfully reinvented himself. And I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. He really was Joe Strummer. He was a new person, invented, and he was totally authentic. But I think seeing me, I was middle class and inauthentically trying to put on Cockney accents and trying to be part of this whole new wave punk thing, I think it kind of reminded him too uncomfortably of where he'd come from, and I think he might not have liked that.
You're very honest about yourself, Tom. It's amazing. A lot of people wouldn't necessarily say that about themselves, but...
it's true.
Well, there you have it. You then had a sort of, renaissance, a revival. War Baby became your biggest hit. Tell us about that period.
I had to flee the country because I owed so much money to so many people. So I had to sell off everything that wasn't nailed down. And if you've got time for a quick 2-minute story about that, there was all the old flight cases and mic stands left over from the Tom Robinson band cluttering up the garage. I had to get rid of them, put an advert in the Melody Maker. 2 geezers came round to look at them. They had dreadlocks down to here. They were wearing old combat fatigues and berets, and they were looking at this equipment. And one of them saw Tom Robinson Band logo stenciled on the side of the flight case. And he said, "Yeah, man, Tom Robinson, what happened to him?" And I said, "Actually, I am Tom Robinson." And this bloke cheered right up. He said, "Hey, Tom, man, divest yourself of all this. You don't need these old flight cases. You'll write another song. You'll come back." I said, "Sure. Look at Eddie Grant." He said, "I am Eddie Grant." I've told that so many times, but it's actually true. It really happened.
Amazing. Eddie Grant in so many bands, The Equals being obviously one of his first major successes.
Yeah, but then 10 years later, he'd come back with his own studio in Stamford Hill, low-budget studio, turning out #1 hits like Electric Avenue,
Now in the street there is violence, and Electric Avenue, and then we'll take it higher.
I love those records, those Eddie Grant solo records. They're great.
I don't want to.
I mean, that people see that as quite cheesy, but it's amazing.
No.
It's
Top
amazing
records. Top records.
We're going to move on to your next choice, which is a song I know you hold very dear to your heart, and I've seen you do some expressive dancing to this next record. The Blue Nile, Tinseltown in the Rain.
Oh, God, yes. Well, I just love that chorus where he goes, "Do I love you? Yes, I love you." Oh, it's such a wonderful, affirmative song, I'd like that to be played at my funeral, It's so full of joy, love, affirmation, and it's one of the greatest records ever made by anyone, anywhere.
Yeah, I know. I think it's absolutely astonishing, and so great that you love it with such passion, as you love everything with such passion, doesn't he, ladies and gentlemen? Now we've talked so far about a little bit about your childhood, and obviously lots about these records and your musical career, but there's a completely new side of your career in life, which is broadcasting. Where did your love of radio come from?
Completely by accident. I was doing a show in London at the Dominion Theatre around the time of War Baby. We had an album, doing a successful sold-out show. A producer from the BBC World Service came backstage. She said, "I really like the bit in between the songs when you talk to the audience. You've got a great voice for radio. Would you like your own 15-minute series on the BBC World Service, just introducing other people's records that you like? Because I love the sound of your talking. So you don't look a gift horse in the teeth, I thought, okay, let's give that a go. And I discovered it was quite fun to actually talk to people about music and share stuff that you know and that they don't know. And that's one of the joys of doing this. Is, you know, some of your listeners out there won't know these songs, but they will go and investigate these artists and find this wealth of brilliant music that's out there.
Well, you're an absolute natural at it and have become a legendary broadcaster now. And you must be one of the few people that's broadcast on the World Service, plus Radio 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Live and 6 Music.
It's true.
And one of the founding DJs and still at BBC Radio 6 Music.
Yeah, I was very lucky with that. I used to be on Radio 4 in the 90s, and one of the producers from that later came up to me and said, we're doing this experimental thing with a thing called digital radio. Would you, just as a favour, come and read some links for us? So went to this experimental unit where they were just putting together playlists, and they wanted somebody to come and go, that was, this is, that was, this is, just so they could hear what radio shows would sound like, so to work out the music policy for this new station called Network Y. And I got slowly sucked into it and gradually started turning up and becoming part of the team. Finally, the head of Radio 2 came in and said, we've got the green light. We don't know what we're going to call it, but Network Y is going live. And Tom, we want you to be on it. So I got a new job at the age of 52.
What does BBC Radio 6 Music, what does it mean to you? Because it's become an institution.
There was a move to close it. I think what we need more of is access for music that isn't strictly commercial. The music industry is there to make money, and it's not that different from the baked bean industry. And a lot of the people investing in it and a lot of the big corporations that own it and back it aren't looking for artistry, they're looking for dollars. And increasingly now in the world of streaming, music is becoming content instead of product. And that's really important. It's something, content is like you turn on a tap and something comes out. Product is a thing that you own and take home and treasure. I think make as much space as we can on the airwaves and on the interwebs for music that is passionate and that people love and own and follow and belong to with a passion. So for the new generation of artists, we've got to make sure that they have a future and find an audience, and that's our mission at Six Music and, of course, at BBC Introducing, is to make sure that they don't have to swarm up the greasy pole of the music industry to try and get heard, that somebody will actually give them a chance to find a wider audience.
Yes, amen to that, ladies and gentlemen. And the next tune is an absolute belter. Public Enemy, Bring the Noise.
Yo, Chuck, these honey drippers are still front on us. Show them that we can do this. Bring the noise.
Public Enemy and Bring the Noise, chosen by Tom Robinson. Why that particular track? Why that band?
That was a song that just changed everything. End of the 80s. Everything that we'd known up to then, Beatles, Elvis, everything that came up to then, was down one particular path. Suddenly, rap music made sense for me, that it was nothing to do with playing instruments or writing melodies. It was sheer energy. And the music, although it was lifted from other records, the grooves were as authentic as anything James Brown ever did. It was incredible noise, created in the most artistic way possible, with the most passionate delivery. And a record that, once I had it on my headphones, it just blew my mind. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. And then it opened up the whole vista of being able to go back to the whole Def Jam catalogue and the previous pioneers who'd led up to it. I owe so much to that record. And if anybody doesn't like hip-hop, and there are plenty of people who don't, that record, It Takes the Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back by Public Enemy, is a great entry point if you come from a rock and roll background.
And also more protest music. There's a theme going on here.
It's got to be real. It's got to be passionate. I mean, why make another record that's just like every other record that's gone before?
Well, you mentioned BBC Introducing, and how important is discovering this new music that we both love, but, you know, doing it as a job. It's almost like a sort of activism in its own way.
It totally is activism, and it's empowerment. I think what we want to do from the position that we've had, because both you and I, in our different ways, have had a life in music, in the music industry. We've seen so much of it, and we've had so much experience. What we need to be able to do is to say to the next generation, and by that I don't mean young people necessarily. It could be people 50, 60 years old starting out. Doesn't matter, whoever you are, if you're starting out making music, then we need to say to you, yes, you can. The songs have got to be great, and the connection with the audience is all that matters. The only reason you want to be on Radio 1, the only reason you want to play Glastonbury, actually, is to find an audience. What really matters is the creators and the consumers getting together. The music industry tries to insert itself in between and cream off as much money as it can in the process. And our job is to make that connection as close and tight as we can to give young, new people careers in the future.
This next record from 2009, I believe, yes, from the album Bird Brains, Merrill Garbus, also known as Tune Yards, and this is Hatari. Again, just a short section of Hatari by Tune Yards. Why that particular one, Tom?
It just doesn't sound like anything else on earth. That's the whole point. Instead of recycling the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the noughties, she just came up with something completely fresh. She recorded it on a dictaphone because she liked the distortion that it made. And then she put it on the free GarageBand software you get with an Apple Mac computer and mixed it on that and sent it off. A record company signed it, and she was playing concert halls around the world just because her ideas are so fresh and original. And I love that record because it does say to anybody, come on, you can do better than that. Let's be really fresh. Check out Merrill Garbus.
What do you prefer, being a musician, a songwriter, or being a broadcaster?
Nothing compares to showing off on stage. Walking out there on a stage with a guitar, whether it's 50 people or 500 people who actually want to hear what you do, and having a chance to actually go perform heart to heart, direct to an audience, is incomparable. Recording doesn't do it, broadcasting doesn't do it, but when you're in a room with people and creating something that only happens that night, at that moment, and it's just between you, you're not recording it, not nothing. It's so special, and I've never tired of it, and all the time I've been doing it, and I hope I never will.
Yeah, well, you're still doing it as well. Tom, if you don't mind me saying, you're 73 years old.
I'll be happy if I can carry on doing exactly what I'm doing at the moment. Take the dog for a walk, sleep in my own bed, go on holiday with the wife, do a bit of campaigning, play some music, do some broadcasting. I'm very, very happy with the cards. I've been blessed with the cards that life has dealt me, and I'm eternally grateful, and long may it continue.